Gautam, it's a pleasure. Thanks for jumping on with us today. I'd love to hear kind of like a 2 to 3 minute rundown of who you are and what you do.
Perfect. Yeah, nice to meet you, James. So, yeah, my name's Gautam, co-founder, CEO One Shot. We are an autonomous prospecting platform. So, what does that mean? Think of us as like a fully AI salesperson. So, we go from finding who the perfect contact is for your company to speak to. Once we found that person, we use AI to create the perfect message. So, I know that sounds like AI and generative text and creating the perfect message, but what we do is we break that message down. So we look at who's that person, what's their seniority, what industry they're in, are they technical, are they business focused, are they 1 year into the role, are they 10 years into the role? So we break that message down and then we automatically contact them. On average, we see a higher response rate than a physical human salesperson. And we actually work alongside sales teams in delivering net new meetings and responses. And then prior to starting One Shot, my background is 20 years in B2B enterprise sales. So I've built, scaled, and managed typically US companies moving into EMEA, so Series A, Series B companies, building out that entire EMEA team, anywhere from $1 million up to $40 million. So typically hiring out a team of 30, 40 salespeople over a period of 2, 3 years. Love sales. Building a sales company, and anything sales, anything B2B is like my background.
Gautam, there's a lot to unpack there. One of the things I want to jump into is how does the technology work behind One Shot?
Yeah.
So like, let's say just hypothetically, you've got a profile of somebody. First of all, what does that profile look like when you feed it into your system? So I'm just going to throw something. Let's say you got a company targeting executives at medium-sized corporations in the HR industry or something like that.
Yep.
So what do you have to input into your system, and then how does it take that and break that down? Like, did you have to feed it vast amounts of data, or what's kind of going on behind the scene?
Yeah. Good question. So I guess even before we get to like how do we find that HR person? How do we target that HR company? So the first thing we do, even before we get to the person, think of this as 3 parts: finding the right account, finding the right person, and creating the right message. So the person's almost the second part of this. So before we get to the person, it's how do we know that we're targeting the right account? If we're selling HR software to HR people, we don't want to be contacting a sales director or a CTO, right? We probably want to make sure. So the first thing we do is how do we identify the right account? We integrate with our customer CRM system. So the first thing we do is analyze their existing customer data. So we understand who their customers are, who their opportunities are with, who their meetings are with. So we can clearly see, okay, these guys are 80% of their customers are HR platforms or tech companies or finance companies, and they sell to CHROs or HR directors or talent acquisition managers, whatever those HR titles might be. Then we're like, okay, good. We know that they're a right fit person. Now we have to find the individual. So there's multiple data sources you can find a person from. So obviously LinkedIn being one, the big data providers being one. So let's say we find, let's call it Elon Musk, who's a HR manager, right? Barclays Bank. So it's a complete random set of people there. But how do we know to send the right message to that person? So the first thing we do is look at their LinkedIn profile. On someone's LinkedIn profile, you'll typically find a bio, a current job descriptions, recommendations, previous companies, skills. So now we have to create the message. How do we create the message based on that person? We can look at, do we have any customers in their existing employers? So he's previously worked at HSBC. So we know that HSBC is a customer. We've sold to those ones. We know that this person is a HR director or senior C-level person. So now we actually feed all of that into our system. So existing customers, recommendations, referrals, bio, recommendations. There's a ton of stuff we feed in, and that creates the message, taking all of that data into play.
Right. Okay. And then would you then integrate with tools like Sales Navigator and whatnot on LinkedIn then? Is that how Like, is that one of the integrations that you have?
Yep. So we integrate with their CRM systems. So HubSpot, Salesforce. We have even smaller companies not on CRM, so we can look at CSV files. Then we work with the data providers. So LinkedIn, and there's, I don't know how much everyone knows about data providers, but there's like 20 or 30 out there. There's huge ones, there's small ones. You can get list brokers. The advantage of us is we work alongside most of the major data providers. So we're not tied into just one data provider. So if they don't have the data, we can go and bounce it off to someone else.
That sounds like a fantastic piece of tech. One other uncertainty that I had was, so let's say you dealing with a client that knows their ICP, their ideal customer profile, and that's clearly there in their data, like you just described. 80% of their customers are these HR firms. So would I be right in saying that one shot is ideal for when you know an ICP and you're trying to consolidate and reach out to more people that fit that profile? Or is it something that can also help you sculpt out an ideal customer profile and expand into new markets? Because it sounds more like the former from your description, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's a kind of a bit of both. So let's actually just take both of those examples there. One is we're a company that absolutely knows our ICP. We know every single job title we should be selling to. We know every single industry. We've done our total addressable market study. We know there's 6,000 companies we should be selling to. We just don't have the people power to contact all of those. There might be 4 contacts per company. You've got 6,000 companies. That's 24,000 people. A good BDR, SDR can probably reach out to, in a high quality way, 20 people a day. So you're talking, what's that, like 400 a month, 5,000 a year. And then that's just like one resource. So what we help those companies do who are dead set on a very fixed ICP is we can help scale and touch more of their ICP without them having to hire a big team. And we do that in a high quality way as well, like I touched on the messaging. The thing is with those people who have a fixed ICP is we speak to hundreds of companies, from small startups to Series B, C, D companies, even public companies. And even when they have a fixed ICP, they have different products, they have different features, they have different personas. So actually, even if you're selling to HR companies or HR platforms, there could still be another use case in a software company, in a finance company, into different personas. So actually, the best performing tech companies who grow are constantly looking at ways of how we can sell our product into a different department, how we can sell it into a different industry. And because of One Shot's fully autonomous, we can basically find those new companies and new industries automatically. The other things to look out for is, okay, that's one example. We have a fixed ICP, is there's a ton of data when you prospect. So let's say we prospect on average 2,000-3,000 new people per company per month. That's a ton of data we get. We get data on what's the open rate, what's the response rate, and actually you'll find a ton of really good things that you never even knew existed. So we could suddenly start seeing, wow, we didn't realize we were getting a 7% response rate. An industry average, by the way, is like 1.5%. So if you suddenly start seeing a 7% response rate from a VP of finance in pharmaceutical companies, that might not have been on your ICP list, but do a quick test. You've kind of like, okay, something is really resonating. Our messaging is really resonating with the VP of finance here. They've introduced us to whoever, the CTO, the HR director now. So it's good companies have a dynamic ICP. They're constantly looking at how can we target new messaging, how can we target new industries. Instead of building a ton of product, why don't you actually just start prospecting, seeing what resonates and seeing who's taking the meeting before you invest in salespeople and product time. So yeah, we're really fluid, but we look past just wins. We look at open rates, response rates, meeting rates. We send them analysis to say, yeah. So you can suddenly start seeing ICP you didn't know existed, and bringing it into the foreground quite quickly.
Yeah, what I love about that is there's obviously a lot of information there, but maybe for lack of a better description, it's almost like a wolf in sheep's clothing kind of thing. where I see like your huge USP is that data play underneath, as you describe all of the analytics that allow you to kind of help your customers hone in on their ICP and to kind of tweak their operations and to optimize them, as well as, what is perhaps more kind of immediate and customer facing, which is the scraping capabilities and the, individual messaging customization. Do you have to like reach a critical mass of customers before you get to that point where it's like, I have enough data that I can confidently say, okay, these kind of clients have this open rate, and therefore you should try this kind of approach to them. And perhaps on top of that, kind of what are the metrics you're looking for then, that would tell you, all right, this is good for this set of customers?
Yeah, completely. I think we can be up and running. So we absolutely need the data to see what's working. So we work in sprints. So think of this as like, think of a normal SDR, BDR. So people are familiar with like a normal, hey, we hire a BDR, we pay them whatever, 50, 70 grand a year. What is the expectation of that human that you've hired into the business? You give them, they don't know anything about your business. They don't know anything about your persona. They don't know anything about the product. That kind of month one, they're learning about the product. They're learning about who the end user is. They're seeing what type of messaging works. And really in that month one, if a physical hire, you just want them to get the process underway. You want them to get prospecting. The advantage of us is because we're software, we do that really quickly. So we can actually analyze all of the previous work that they've done. We can look in their CRM like, okay, wow, they've got 100 customers. They've got 20 customers. They work with, I don't know, let's just pick, I'm going to keep picking finance companies. They work with Barclays. Who are Barclays' top 10 competitors? That we're not speaking to them. So we can analyze really quickly on their historical data. Then what we do is we start prospecting immediately, like based on our assumptions, which are 50% of their customers in finance, 50% in pharmaceutical. That means that let's target those two industries, but let's target the lookalikes of their existing customers. Let's check CRM, make sure they haven't been contacted. That's our kind of assumption. Okay, they're seeing success here. We should replicate that success. Then we start prospecting. We automatically produce the messaging, and we'll typically go after like anywhere near to like 100, 200 people at minimum per week. So think after 2 weeks, we've already contacted, let's say 500 people. In those 500 people, there's going to be already data coming out. The data points we're looking at are meetings being number one. How many of those 500 have booked meetings? That's obviously the best sign of success here is someone's taking time and booking in the calendar. The second is responses. They've responded to a message. They might want more info. They might not be interested. The third thing we look at is open rate. Are they even opening the message? And then on top of the open rate, we can see how many times they've opened it. So we've got all of this data. So even after like 500, even after 2 weeks, we can kind of get a feel for what's working. By the end of sprint one, which is probably 4 weeks in, we already know what to do for sprint two. We already know we should be contacting, ignore the CTOs. They don't respond. The CTOs at the big banks don't respond to us. But actually, if we look at the VP of technology, or we look at the DevOps manager, or we look at the HR manager, we see a really good response rate. We've actually uncovered for sprint two, another 2,000 of those people. So we're already going in. So 2 weeks, we kind of know. By a month, we're already kicking off sprint two based on that data. So fairly quickly.
So the first sprint is really casting a wider net. And then the second one is a filtration of that wider net, kind of honing down on what's really working.
Yeah, exactly. So think of sprint one, we'll probably pick 4 industries, maybe 4 personas per industries. There might be as big as 16 different groups there. Out of those 16 for sprint two, we're looking to take it down to 4. So we can kind of ditch those, and we can still experiment and do things with that. But then it's really like, okay, let's focus on what's working. Conversely, we may get a really low response rate from a group everyone thought was going to be really good. So then it's okay, why didn't that perform? And typically it's messaging. So we'll look at our messaging engine, we'll look at the personalization, we'll look at the pain points with the customer.
That's what my biggest questions actually around. Because before you came on, I was looking at one shot, and I was just thinking, Gautam, how outreach and DMing someone on LinkedIn or sending a cold email is such a language sensitive task, right? It's something that even the slightest change of wording can get a response or not get a response. How do you manage to do that with technology? How do you get the technology realistic enough that someone is like, oh yeah, this, because one of the things that's always told to you is that people connect with emotion when they feel like emotionally awakened by a message or something, it evokes something within them, they feel inclined to respond. How do you manage to achieve that with technology?
Yeah, it's really hard. So
Imagine, yeah.
I guess we've been at this for 2 years, and before we even had the fully autonomous platform, all we did since like our pre-seed, which was Jan 21, which is 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, we spent 18 months just on messaging. So we worked with SDR teams exclusively from like the fastest growing software companies in the world. So teams with like 20, 30, 40 SDRs. Some of like, I don't know if I can mention them, so I won't, but they're fast growing all the way from Series B all the way to public companies. Big teams, big salespeople. All of those SDRs at those companies are tasked with personalizing their prospecting. So before they reach out to anyone, they're told, okay, go on their LinkedIn, read their annual reports, look for news on them. What we actually found is they didn't have time to do that every single day. So actually the quality of message that are getting sent and the quality of message we're all receiving every day, you receive or I receive every day, I think we can all honestly say they're not great. They're very generic. Maybe once every 2 weeks, you'll get a really good personalized message where you'll sit back and like, oh, wow, okay. They've legitimately done their research. They know I'm the right person. They found something that's really resonated with me. So if you think about that, I would go as far as saying that 95% of the messages people receive suck, right? They are just really generic. They've put you into a really generic sequence. They've not looked at your profile. They've not even seen if you're the right person. It's that old spray and pray tactic. Hey, if I contact 100 people, maybe 1-2 people might respond. My boss is only targeting me with 8 meetings a month. I can probably hit that from this approach. I can chill out the rest of the time. So I think we're firstly dealing with the current standard of today's messages suck, right? I don't want to beat up on all salespeople because there was some really good salespeople who send out really high quality message. Mm-hmm. So we're starting with a low benchmark. Whatever people say, there isn't a high quality of message. So what we do is because we're using AI, we can read that profile. The things that really resonate are by looking at someone's LinkedIn activity. So we can see, okay, Suraj, you've just recently liked a post on ChatGPT. Or we can look back and say, okay, this guy is really, he's congratulating 5 of his ex-colleagues at a previous company. So we can use AI to create messages based on things that they're liking, things that they're sharing. Previous employers, a senior hire, just straight away we're pulling a message that resonates with the person we're sending it to. So that could be, hey Suraj, I noticed you really like that ChatGPT post about how you can create like the best cold email. Have you used it and tried it yourself? And straight away, that resonates with someone. So, okay, they've actually taken the time to read my LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. They see that it's something I like, and their solution is aligned to something on that. So their link is good. So we see that works really, really well. So looking at their recent activity, humor always plays a part into it. So we've trained our kind of AI models to bring in that humor, right? So looking at maybe where they're based, the local sports team, something they've shared. Even when you prospect CTOs or C-levels at large companies, the goal is to get their attention. You're not looking to sell them $1 million deal on a cold email. You're just looking to either pass this email to someone relevant in your team, respond to me or tell me to come back in a few months, or at least know what my company does. And that's the name of the game.
Sounds really sophisticated. It sounds like you guys have taken a lot of different aspects of human communication into account and kind of embedded that within the technology.
Yeah, we have been at this for a long time. So we, like with any company or with any salesperson, the V1 of everything like sucks, right? So we started with really rubbish messaging. Hey, Suraj, I noticed we have 174 mutual connections in common. It would be great to connect, or something. We started with those. If you receive those, that's probably our fault.
Was it like a proper kind of like DM with the first name, last name, and like, hey, I saw you worked at X, and then just replacing them? Yeah, this is really interesting. Is it still, if you don't mind me asking, is it still like that? Is it still a case where you have a DM like a template and you fill in different lines, or is it much more fluid and you
much more fluid? Yeah.
Is that done with like generative AI as well? Do you have any aspects of that embedded within your tech?
Yeah. So we started off with just messaging that ultimately messaging is really subjective, right? So what I think is a really good message, you could think is a terrible message. I've seen really bad messages get responses and people comment how good those messages are. So it's really subjective to the individual, right? So everything we do is based on open rate and response rate because the data is the only thing that doesn't lie, right? It's not subjective. Like we know if we send a high quality message, we will see a triple in response rate. So one thing we learned was taking different people's opinions, salespeople, isn't actually that good to build a tech off because actually what's one good message to someone else is really poor message. So one thing we do, and we use generative AI for all of our messaging. From the opening line to the CTA. And so what we've built out is we've taken a simple message and we've just broken that down completely from how can we personalize the subject line? We see a 50% increase in response rate if the subject line is under 3 words. Then taking the actual first line, that intro line of the email, how can we personalize that where they open the message and they at least read the rest of the message? So a good email is under 70 words. We see a highest response rate coming under 70 words. We then break that into pain point and pitch. So how is that pain point resonating with the person we're sending it to? And so that pain point, and then we go into the value prop. How is my value prop of my company going to solve that pain point I've mentioned in the first line? And then the final bit is a proof point. So I've personalized it. I've produced a pain point. I've got my value prop, and my proof point is, hey, we've worked with companies X, Y, and Z on solving that exact issue. So you should trust it. And then the final bit is the CTA. The CTA is like, okay, one thing that we've seen and everyone does in their messages, hey, do you have 10 minutes, 15 minutes free for a demo? We've seen that like just asking for a demo doesn't even like work that well. So it's very rare that you get demos actually booked off that. What works is like really experimenting with your CTA. So it might be, hey, James, we've got a really good white paper, or we've got a really good blog on the top 10 personalizations that get responses. Do you want me to send that over to you? So actually providing them with value, providing them with content, you think that actually just increases the response rate. And then you provide them with that content, and then you normally get a meeting like one message after. So it's really about experimenting, because we're an AI platform, we can experiment with everything really quickly without humans.
That's a really interesting insight, actually, because obviously we do a lot of outreach for our podcast, for our other activities. And I'll watch like a podcast that they've done in the past, or I'll try and find a blog they've written and really put it out. But obviously you're spending 20, 30 minutes minimum doing that for each target. And if I'm doing that, and if I really want to personalize and it's quite like a high value person and someone I really want to get on, I'm happy to do that. But then obviously it becomes a bit of a time sink, and you can easily spend days doing this. So it's really interesting, because what you said at the end there, that's interesting insight. The call to action, typically you want to get them signed on as quickly as possible. It's like, just book the call, and it's almost like you can't back out of it then, like just get them on the call and you'll be in front of them. It almost feels like sending them a blog or something is kind of kicking the can down the road. I certainly used to feel like that, and I know a lot of other people do that. It's like I need to get in front of you ASAP so I can, show you what I'm all about. But actually, provided them value is a little bit of a longer term play. You're slightly less aggressive, and maybe you get seen kind of better in your prospects' eyes further down the road. So it's definitely an interesting angle that I think people should experiment with.
Yeah, and like we've got the data. The response rate to do that softer CTA is 3 times higher than requesting a demo. And actually, those still go on to book a demo. So you still get those people on the call, and you do it in a really soft way compared to, hey, let me get you on the call for 20 minutes so I can sell to you. I'm another salesperson. I want something from you. I'm trying to make my commission for the month. So that didn't work. We're competing with like thousands and thousands of salespeople. The other CTAs are trying to get them along to an event, mentioning mutual connection. Those types of softer CTAs work really, really well.
That's fascinating. I think that's really insightful for listeners as well. Aspiring entrepreneurs looking to advance their sales and improve their kind of response rates. One thing I want to touch on as well, because you mentioned like most of the DMs that we receive these days absolutely suck, right? It's like most people don't know how to do it right. You touched on a couple of things of how someone could do it right, reading annual reports, digging into the background of the people that they're messaging. From your vast experience in sales, Gautam, what would you say are the things that people can do right to enhance their selling abilities, particularly in the prospecting and reaching out phase?
Yeah. So good questions. I think of this as prospecting and outbound is very much multi-channel, multi-touch. So the main channels you've got are basically LinkedIn, email, and cold calling. Those are your kind of thing. There are people talking about sending people WhatsApps and messages and things like that, and people do it and get results. But think of your 3 major channels as LinkedIn, cold calling and messaging, emailing, effectively. So before you reach out to anyone, each of those channels are completely differently. There's stats like I think 4 years ago it was you need 8 touch points across multi-channel to get a response. Now I think it's some crazy amount like 18 or 19. What you need to do is think about each of those channels, right? Think about before you reach out to someone on LinkedIn, it's a connection request. Think from the receiver side of things. They're probably getting 20 connection requests a day. You've got 2 bits. One is you can either have one of those really cheesy LinkedIn profiles. I help companies do blah 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 blah, and they'll immediately smell that as like it's a fishy sales email, and they'll just push reject, right? I don't want, as soon as I accept this, they're going to start pitching product on me. I can't be bothered with that. Or they're using an automated thing where I'm going to get like 20 messages as soon as I accept. So people are wary of like, I don't want to be sold to. No one in the world wants to be sold to. So really think, before you even send out a connection request, think about your profile and when they receive that message. So, don't have the really cheesy profiles, especially if you're selling to like a senior person, an enterprise person. You think about when they receive that, they're going to see your name, they're going to see your job title. They may click in and view your profile. So again, think about like that experience for them. Before they push reject, they're likely to read your title, your company. They might go through your LinkedIn. Okay, I know this person, I don't know this person. This is a salesperson, they're going to sell to me. So start with your profile if you're thinking about LinkedIn. The second bit is like the age-old question of to put a personalized connection request or not. Like there's arguments that people will tell you, put one in and you'll see a higher rate, or don't put one in. Experiment with each person, right? Every single person who's listening to it has a different persona. They're targeting a different person. So LinkedIn allow you to send 100 connection requests a week. So super easy. Sending 20 a day takes you, 15 minutes. Take that 15 minutes, maybe one day put a personalized connection request in there, one day don't, and just review your data at the end of the week and see what was my connection acceptance rate with and without. Then actually, if you are going to use one, what can you use? Always, I would, again, avoid anything cheesy. anything cheesy, just kick yourself before you do it. Like reread the message before you send it and think, is this a cheesy message? Am I selling to this person? Because they will not accept. So simple things like, hey, activity is the go-to thing to go to. So quickly look at their profile, see if they've posted anything, and comment on that activity. Like, oh, hey, James, just noticed you released this podcast. Really cool question that you asked there. Love to stay connected with you. Super simple message. Hey, I'm not going to sell to you. I just want to connect with you. LinkedIn's algorithm as well means that when you connect with someone, any content you share appears in their feed quite quickly. So think about social selling, the content you share on LinkedIn. So think about that. Email, think about your subject line and think about that opening line. Think, how am I going to get their attention on their opening line? And then cold calling, if you're going to reach out to people on cold calling, practice your 15-second elevator pitch. So those are, again, 3 different channels, 3 different completely ways of approaching it. But what's consistent with all of them is think about how you would feel if you received this. If someone cold called you, if someone sent you that connection request, would you respond to it? Would you read it or would you delete it? And so just really be conscious of that every time you do any prospecting.
I know personally, it's like, I will never open anything that's like a long paragraph. Like I don't have the time. I cannot be asked to read it. If you send me something, to be honest, from my perspective, I don't really care if you're trying to sell me something overtly. As long as it's like 2 or 3 lines, I will actually open and take the time to read it. I guess this is perhaps it's more of like a younger person generational thing where we're so used to social media, like WhatsApp messaging. We're used to getting short blocks of information. I typically find it just so much easier to digest quick bits of information. I'll give you the time of day, if your hook is actually interesting. But I think it's really insightful there as well. What you said about different channels. I just want to ask Gautam as well, in terms of your experience as a sales leader for so many years. We speak to a lot of people on this podcast in terms of like kind of, anywhere from 20 something entrepreneurs who are starting out their first business, who are pre-seed, to, guys who have been in the game and really know the way around it. What is it, perhaps beyond the obvious of obviously your kind of hands-on sales experience, what kind of business lessons have you learned from your time, being a sales leader that are directly applicable to you starting and running a startup right now?
Yeah, there's lots, right? I think there's a stat, I can't remember the updated one, but I think like 80% of like CEOs and FTSE 100 companies have a sales background. Like sales is such a transferable skill set to have. It's communication. It's a tough job. You have a lot of rejection. It's a daily grind. You have to stay consistent. You have to be optimistic. Those are just general things good entrepreneurs have and good salespeople have. They're fully transferable. I think when you manage and build scale sales teams, there's 2 different things. There's an individual contributor as a salesperson. I did that for 10 years. And that's a really hard role. And you can start, typically an entry role is an SDR. People have to kind of get their 12, 18 months done as being an SDR. And what you learn in that is just being consistent. It's probably the hardest job in the world. Well, no, there's hardest job in tech, I would say, where you are 95% of the time is you're just doing the same thing and you're just being rejected. You have to okay, I've got to make 50 cold calls today. It's not enjoyable making cold calls, speaking to people who do not want to speak to you every single day. Where do you get the energy to do that every single day? And then you've got to send these emails. And then you've got your boss who's probably saying, why haven't you booked your 10 meetings this month? You're not making enough calls. Your email quality isn't good enough. And you've got other people in the team who might have got lucky. They sent 5 emails and they got 5 responses back. So just the ability to just grind it out and stay consistent. So if I was going to say, shot,
speaking to people who don't want to speak to me, story of my life. Yeah.
That's mine.
At least James has a chance of a couple of the people wanting to speak to him, whereas in his personal life is the opposite. There's nobody.
Yeah.
Well,
I think I'm the same as well.
Yeah, not to interrupt. I'd love to hear more, but just I think that's a key lesson as well. Just having that resilience and really being able to stick it out and deal with rejection. And obviously, it's something that comes up time and time again. It's an essential skill to have in social situations as well. Which I believe I'm a strong proponent of. Just being proactive and putting yourself out there and jumping in at the deep end. end. And I feel like this is definitely a blocker for many people who are starting out their career or being a first-time founder. It's like they have such a passion for intrinsically what they're doing or what they're building, but they're not willing to go the extra mile and really put themselves out in front of people. But thank you for that. Yeah, please do continue.
Yeah, and that's it. You've literally, and you've got to be consistent. Anyone in the world can be motivated for one day or 1 week. Like, it's easy. Anyone can go on a diet for one day. Anyone can go to the gym for one day, right? It's like, where do the results come? It's 3, 6, 12 months of grinding it every single day and being consistent. So think about I'm talking like salespeople and what lessons I've learned specifically. It's that consistency. It's that contacting 20 people every single day and sticking to it. Don't associate yourself with the output. Like, for me personally, I want a publicly listed company. I would love One Shot to IPO for $10 billion, right? But obviously, I don't even think about that. I spend zero time thinking about that. What I'm thinking of is, how do we drive our Series A? What systems have we got in place to do that? We need to hit X amount of revenue. That means we need to book X many meetings and close X much revenue. We need to advance the product in these different ways. And what's my system to achieve that? So just having that consistency. Then I say again, high performing salespeople. I'm talking, when I say high performing salespeople, I've been lucky enough to manage some incredibly good salespeople over the last 10 years. So when I say hyper good salespeople, I'm talking salespeople who make over $1 million a year in commission. And so what are the best salespeople doing versus the lower performing salespeople? They number one, they know how to work alongside the team. They know when to bring in senior management. And again, this applies to all startups as well. Like, know your team, know who to bring in when. Again, they're consistent. They set their targets. They don't want to just hit target. If their revenue target's $1 million, they have a system in place to hit $2 million. So the worst case, what they end up is 150% a number. In most cases, they'll blow it out by 3x. The lower performers will set their sight on, what is my target for the year? How do I hit my minimum target? And guess what? They end up performing under that target. So have a system in place to overachieve. Think about that in any business, whether you're pre-seed, seed, Series A. For us, Series A, you need $1 million ARR. So our goal is, how do we hit 1.5 million, and how do we achieve that in half the amount of time? If we fail, we're still going to be pretty close to an overachieving anyway. So consistency, setting your targets, setting your daily metrics matters for a CEO of a tech company, a startup, as much as a good high-performing salesperson.
Yeah, it ties back to what you were saying earlier when you got somebody in a business who's trying to do sales and just goes and does the most conventional method, messages 100 people with a bland, dry message just to meet their minimum quota. And it reminds me of something I read online, I think it was about last week, where it's like, what separates a great employee from a good employee? And it was like, a good employee works 9 hours a day, a great employee works 9 hours a day. But they work 8 hours, and the last hour they spend trying to improve and optimize the previous 8 hours. So still the exact same amount of time, but every single day there's a slight investment into what you just described as the system, the process of how you're actually going to scale and expand. I think there's a lot to say for that, just in general, in life, in business, whatever goals somebody has, thinking about what are the logistics of me actually trying to achieve this? Not just, definitely in my case, in my experience, that when I just try to mindlessly attempt any sort of feat or any kind of task, you usually go hard for about a week and a half, and then burn out. Whereas if you think about an actual process behind it and thinking about step by step, first I'm going to do this, and at this point I will probably feel tired, and I'll probably take a rest, and then I'll come back and do this. And you think about it in a formulaic approach, there's just, the data speaks for itself, as you were saying.
Yeah. And the best bit about that system and that data points is those are actually really small daily tasks you have to do. So if you want to deliver $1 million in revenue, $2 million in revenue, that's a scary number. That's a big number, right? Whatever stage of company, if you're an individual contributor, if you're a startup. But if you actually break that down on a daily basis, what do you actually have to do on a daily basis? Chances are it's probably only 2-3 hours of quality work a day. It's not oh my God, I need to hit $2 million. That's going to take me 18 hours a day. It's actually, if you have a good system, it's only 2 hours. I need to do this every single day for 2 hours. If I'm consistent with it, and you're going to have off days, and that's fine, but if I'm consistent with it 90% of the time, you will achieve it every single time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really insightful. Thanks, Gautam. I want to ask as well, just before we wrap up, in terms of like where we are now in 2023, obviously there's been a lot of noise around tech layoffs, stuff like that. So, even if you're not a salesperson directly affected by the tech layoff, you may well be selling to a customer who has had a significant reduction in seats, and finding it harder to sell and stuff like that. Or maybe you kind of lost, a number of your existing customer base. You might find it hard to go and find new clients because people are kind of have tighter purse strings. What is your kind of take on the climate right now, and what's your advice for anyone going into particularly tech enterprise sales?
Yeah. So I like, obviously I feel for anyone who's losing their jobs right now. It's never nice. But this is also a really good opportunity to improve your skill set by about 1,000 times. Selling in this market is so good for your experience. This isn't, companies with, we've got a ton of VC money, we have to spend it, we're going to buy any product that anyone pitches to us. This is like traditional business. This goes back thousands and thousands of years, which is, what am I selling and does it provide value? But what is the business case attached to it? So I think so I'll show my age now. I was selling during the financial crisis. I was quite young then. And I remember one of our board directors saying, hey, this isn't the first recession and it won't be the last. And the same applies to this recession. It won't be the last. But what you learn during this time is, what is the business case I'm selling? But actually, as a salesperson, fundamentally understanding that business case. So what are the tangible and intangible cost savings my solution is providing to the organization I'm selling to? There'll be some intangible stuff like, you'll save an hour a day. And then, that engineer's an hour a day is $100, $200, therefore my business case. But look at it further. What are the hard cost savings that a CFO cannot disagree with, which are, you're going to reduce your IT, AWS cloud spend by using this solution by $300,000. You are going to be able to reduce headcount in the marketing team by 3x, or not spend all this money on Google ads. So your hard business case is, think of it from a dollar value and start working with your champion on the deal on that business case as early as possible. So there's two things here. One is make sure you have a good champion on the deal. And a good champion on the deal is you test and qualify and validate that person. Like, are they fighting for you when you're not there? Are they helping you understand the business case? Have they even submitted a previous business case? What are the business cases they're getting? So really understand what's needed for sign-off. Ask those types of questions. Secondly, on top of that, is once you start selling and understanding the customer's business case, the customer's process, you'll start seeing that you've probably been underselling your solution. Once you actually start working out the hard business case of what your solution provides the company, it's probably saving them 3, 4, 500,000 a year, and your solution may only cost 50,000, 100,000. So again, we had this with One Shot recently, where a customer brought us in. They really wanted to move forward with our solution. I think we were selling to the VP of marketing, and we were charging, I think, top of my head, like $35,000 for the deal, and they needed to take it to the CFO. And the CFO is getting involved in everything now. And when we went to the CFO, we're like, hey, we actually ran a pilot for this for 3 months. And in that 3 months, you closed $100,000 of new business. And at that point, the CFO cannot say anything, right? They've immediately like, how can we do more? If you're showing a business case of closing $100,000 of net new business and the spend is $50,000 for the year, they've already made their money on the solution. So it comes back to really honing that business case. If you don't know your numbers, like, work out your numbers, speak to your boss, get an understanding of business cases, use ChatGPT. Like, how do I build a business case to a CFO? Like, you've got all the tools out there, but know your numbers inside out, know the value of the solution, understand the priorities.
Yeah, it seems like big takeaways from what you said is be incredibly data driven, and also to be able to think on your feet and to adapt in real time, and not just, as we kind of talked about earlier, sit there, go through the motions, show up for work every day, but actually actively think, how can I kind of alter my messaging in real time, but also perhaps even give feedback to the product that I'm selling, and the whole pricing and the structure around it, to customize to whoever I'm selling to. So that's fantastic advice. Suraj and I, like, we never done sales properly, but we've always kind of been in and around salespeople. Very intrigued by the space, so it's fantastic to get this insight today for our listeners as well. Did you have any final questions, Suraj, before we wrap up?
No, I'm good. I just want to thank you very much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure, gents. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Yeah, really enjoyed it.
Anytime, mate. Thanks so much for jumping on. Take care of yourself.
Cheers, guys. Catch you in a bit. Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.